We're going to get into a whole different ball game this afternoon. We're going to talk specifically about books. We're going to get into books for our next little segment. And we've got two speakers coming up back to back that are going to get into the future of books. And they're people that have really been out there in the field. I want to start with Maureen Mo Gherkins. We call her Mo. She's a seasoned executive who started out as a computer whiz and ended up going to the top of the food chain in the telecommunications industry. She's been a top executive for companies like AT&T and Motorola. Most recently, she was the first female CEO in the history of Zondervan Publishing. And so she's been out there. She's done, listen to these titles of hers. She's been Senior Vice President of Wireless in the office of the chairman at Dell, Senior VP and General Manager of Strategic Marketing at Motorola. She's had positions at AT&T and Bell Labs, and she's the published author of Mother Leads Best, 50 Women Who Are Changing the Way Organizations Define Leadership. She's going to be looking at books and what the next 10 to 20 years are going to reveal and how technology is changing the way we learn. Please welcome Mo Gherkins.
Well, I think you missed my top qualifications to be up here today, and I'm a seminary student. So I think that gives me more qualification, and you'll hear why than all those other things. I also, for 3 years, was the favored publisher of my professors. So they treated me well. They all wanted to publish with me. So I had a different kind of relationship than probably most of the students in the audience have with there. And then if that wasn't good enough, I'm on the board of the seminary I go to. And so I was their student and their boss, sort of. But I really do think that's given me more insight to talk today than some of the other things. But let me just start with a story. When the Lord called me to Zondervan, I had spent 25 years in high tech and went through some interesting moves from analog to digital, and worked in the kind of bureaucratic, stodgy AT&T organization, and watched competitors start coming in with digital products and sort of help manage that massive change. And I think the Lord brought me through that to come into the Christian publishing world. So I got to Zondervan, and everybody thought everything was great, and I really was confused about why I was there, because in all my interviews, everything here is wonderful. So my first day on the job, I said, I know I'm not supposed to be curious, but I'm still recovering from my Catholicism, and I have 3 questions for the Lord. Why didn't you give me publishing background? Why didn't you raise me as an evangelical? And why aren't I a guy? And I got the answers to all 3 within the first week I was there. The company thought it was in good shape, and it wasn't. And not only wasn't it in good shape, it was really doing this in so many ways, in its brand, in its revenue, in its profits, everything, and they were just sitting there in denial. But also they were blind. Everyone there had been in publishing for 19, 20, long amount of years, and they could not see the future. And shortly after that, I met with all the CEOs in Christian publishing, and it was really clear to me they were realizing that technology was coming and digitization was coming, but they were paralyzed by it. And I tell that story because I feel the same thing's happening in education. I think you heard all the stories this morning, but it's really, okay, we see it coming, it's all changing, but what do we do? And how do we do that? And it seems so overwhelming and so massive. And trust me, there is a way, and it involves tremendous collaboration with students, with faculty, with administration, with people from the outside, all things that Barry and his whole team are attempting to do. So I'm really encouraged about what's going on here. So the first question I was asked is, will physical books survive? And I was supposed to give a talk about this, but I'll be quick about it. No. in my opinion, not as a primary educational tool. And I think the stories you saw of the 1-year-old, the 2-year-old, the 3-year-old, I mean, it is just a textbook. Hardcover is not going to be in existence for much longer, my opinion. And I'm Croatian, so I act like I know everything, so I put a bunch of my opinions up there. These are just my opinions. And so my next question was, will digital textbooks survive? And my answer there is sort of. And the reason it's sort of is because all the multimedia you're seeing is going to overwhelm the learning process. It's much better to learn in a multi-sensory environment, especially if you are inclined to learn that way. So some of us older people aren't inclined, so it's not the best tool for us, but we're going to be out of school. Most people my age are, so you don't have to really cater to us. So the book people like to describe it as a digital book, an enhanced book, a book app, and we have plenty, and they're fun and they're exciting, and if you haven't downloaded the Berenstain Bears for your kids, or Rick Warren has come out now with the enhanced PDL, or the PDL app, where he's done a video for every chapter. You can have a 2 or 3 minute video. Unfortunately, it takes 20 minutes to download that book, so it's not, the technology is not quite there. But however, the book people like to describe it as a book, a digital book. And for the education environment, I don't think it's going to look much like a book, but there will be a lot of text in it. So if you want to call that a book, it sort of will exist, in my opinion. So digital books have just skyrocketed. Amazon by last July had sold more digital books than hardcover books. And hardcover books were growing in that same period for Amazon. And so it just was this, once the Kindle took off, it was just crazy. And for fiction, over half the purchases of a fiction book are digital today. And that has to have happened in 18 months? Now, for educational books, and for books that you don't read necessarily from front to back at a couple of sittings, and that you need a table of contents, and you need to look at pictures, and you need to have questions and answers, those books are lagging because the technology isn't there yet to support that. The iPad is getting close, but even with the iPad, there's a number of limitations, and it'll just be a matter of time before they kind of meet the demands of education. Another reason is that the traditional textbook people are not quick to change. I worked for a while on urban education reform in Chicago, and it took, one of my roles was to retrain math and science school teachers and create some kits. And just to get one video into the classroom that was really meaningful and interactive and talented cost millions and millions of dollars. And so educators sort of have backed off. Now that we have enablers and we have all these students that can create this stuff, I think you're going to see an explosion of it. Also, the standards are still emerging. We would like a common way to call this multimedia learning tool that we're going to have, whether it's a book or most of it's going to have integrated video or some sort of the drawing of the pictures. How do you create that in a way that Apple and Amazon will just absorb those and download them? We're missing tons of standards, so there's no way to say, well, how do you bring up a website inside this digital file that some publisher ships off to Apple? None of those standards have been agreed on yet. Once those standards start to emerge, you're going to see an explosion here. Another reason is textbooks isn't where the money is. And so the people, it's just a small growing population of people that can create all this really cool interactive stuff, many of which are here in LA, by the way. They are focused on some real immediate cash. And so there's real immediate payouts for the Bernstein Bears and Dr. Seuss and things like that right now and other things. So it is going to take a little bit of time, but it's inevitable in my mind. The last reason is because digital content hasn't been digitized. You all here at Biola and at Talbot have tremendous amounts of content that hasn't been digitized yet. It is going to be an imperative to start getting that digitized. But every institution, educational institution, lots of institutions are in the same boat. And so the next year or two will just be this massive attempt to digitize existing books. So really, what's the so what for educators? In my opinion, again, the digitization of all this content, the content you have at Talbot, the content everybody has, is going to trigger the most innovation we've ever seen in our history. And I know everyone keeps talking about the amount of innovation that's going on. I don't think we've seen anything yet. And I think it will explode once a couple of the things I just talked about and a few more things I'll talk about get into place. And I think the consequences to education are monumental. I think this career path, types of institutions are going to be completely turned upside down. It's going to hit hard. So what can you do? This thing is big. It's not quite happening yet. It's not quite sure how standards are going to roll out, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. Do you just wait and let the technology kind of set the course? I'm a technologist, 25 years in technology. This isn't, in my mind, about technology. There's a lot of innovation. The innovation I'm talking about is not the innovation you're going to see out of Apple. Apple's going to be a tremendously innovative company. Cisco is. The innovation that's really going to happen is going to happen broader than that. It's what you heard earlier this morning. It's how do you use that technology? What is the best way to teach in the future environment? What is the best way to learn? What is the best way to teach to the most amount of people? Apple's not going to invent that. Cisco's not going to invent that. So my view is if you look back to the greatest period of innovation the world had leading up to the last 20 years or so, or maybe the Industrial Revolution, it was in the 16th century. And what triggered that? I think we all know, we've heard over and over again, the printing press was the agent of change. So there you say, oh, there's technology again. Well, I don't think it was the technology that triggered. I don't think it was the printing press per se. It was a trigger, but what caused all the innovation? What caused all the innovation was the sharing of knowledge. All of a sudden, the Bible, all of a sudden, lots of things that were just limited to a few people became available for many people. And the person I think is the most expert at analyzing that whole innovative process is a lady named Elizabeth Eisenstein. And if you're interested in how to move forward, I would study her. She has a 2-volume book on the impact of sharing knowledge on that particular time in history. It was written a long time ago, but it's quite good. And here are some of the things that she concluded in with a lot of, I think, rigorous analysis. She said the sharing of knowledge massively increased coordination and cooperation. And I think you all see it here. You have tremendous content here, but you know, you can feel in your bones that Biola and everybody else is going to start sharing some of it and sharing some of it for free. And the momentum is such that you're not going to be able to stop that. You might as well join it. And what happens after that? Well, in that case, there was startling scientific progress. And there's going to be startling progress in almost every academic area that you teach here. And so what that led to was new attitudes towards religion and new attitudes towards professors. And actually, it wasn't an improvement. It was decreased respect for professors occurred in that time period, and I believe will occur again here. And I put here less deference to authority in general, but it was primarily to the academics that people became less deferential to. There was a massive increase in creativity. People had more knowledge. They were collaborating more. They were chewing on the same things more. And unfortunately, you heard this morning, and I know it's probably really gut-wrenching for some of the faculty, but the students are getting smarter than the teachers, and that happened here. You see the video from that Wayne guy, Brisbane or whatever his name was, explaining the micro. I mean, a lot of professors can't really put off an explanation in medical school, I would guess, of something that interesting and creative. And so as a faculty member, you really got to think about, okay, what do I do? How do I adopt things that are going to maybe improve my teaching ability to this new generation that's so interactive and needs so much experience and, really don't want to sit in lectures as a preferred choice. And there are tremendous things you can do. And if you love to lecture, you can still lecture. But you can complement that lecturing with a lot of other things. Oop, I went backwards. The last thing I wanted to say is there's going to be significant new career paths, and that I'm telling to the students that are here as well. You have no idea how and what a good position you are sitting, because you are coming out and graduating more competent than many people that are out there in technology. And technology is part of many, many, many businesses. And at Zondervan, we had to do a whole lot of marketing on the internet and trying to figure out how do we go from just putting up signs in a bookstore to kind of attracting somebody to a book on an internet. We hire summer interns, and they have contributed the best ideas, the best creativity, the best solutions. So you are in a cat seat, and I believe there's going to be completely new careers, titles in academics that don't even exist today because of this momentous opening up of knowledge. So, prepare for just some highlights. Knowledge at everyone's fingertips. What is that going to bring about? And when I say everyone, I mean billions of people. Knowledge that maybe today, maybe 1,000 people have access to, or maybe 2,000. All these books are not on the internet yet. Nonstop advances around the world. It's going to just bombard and just keep coming. And I don't care if you're in economics or you're in archaeology. You are going to be bombarded with new information. It could be new old information. It could be new information. But as an academic, how do you keep up with everything that's going on? We talked about the smarter and tons of bad content. I'm sure you're already experiencing students walking in with some material that they got off the internet that is absolutely false. And think about the trillions of bits of data that are going to be out there. How does the good stuff percolate to the top? Well, you guys are in the cat seat of helping that happen because you're the most educated. You're the most discerning. You've spent the most time. You know the most authors. You can do it. But that's a role there that I do believe academics have to really step up to and figure out how to do above all the noise of the random bloggers and somebody who just randomly wants to make up some information. We're also, as you know, got this generation of people who want to discover through experience. I'm going to demo a couple things to kind of give you a sample of that, but it isn't just using technology in the classroom. It's the process of discovery. Jason's going to talk about the whole collaborative process around a book, so I'm not going to go there. I'm going to stay at the higher level, but there is a whole different innovative way that people learn today to find their truth, whether it be algebra or theology. And so think about it. And then less respect for the academy. So, don't be afraid to think about that as a very real possibility when you try and think about what are we going to do about it. Because the avoidance that I saw in AT&T when digital was coming, and in Zondervan when digital was coming, it's not going to be helpful if you don't look at the problem in the face. There's going to be some possible role shifts. I think lecturers are going to become engagers. And I think it was Paul that said something very similar. I think researchers, and I use the term wiki monitors, but I think the world will be wikied, where we need these people, again, vetting and accepting new input and saying, yes, this is valid, no, this isn't, but these repositories of information that go through a vetting process, and again, I think you're in a good place. And then from book writer to video game producer, and I'm sure you're all excited about doing that. For universities, I think you're going to become publishers, and I say classroom publishers here. I'm thinking courseware, not books. So whatever the courseware is, I do believe universities will start packaging it up and sharing it, whether they're sharing it overseas or they're sharing it and distance capability. I think universities have to think about, okay, what is going to be the Biola publishing plan for our courseware? I also think you're going to be data warehouse keepers. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. And I also think you probably want to get into the content classroom syndication. What's already happening, our people are syndicating Biola professor classes. And I can point you to a couple of places where you can get online and for a $40 class, take a class from a few Biola professors. Biola better start doing that, or the universities need to start doing that. So it's done well, but also there's a partnership, a camaraderie, and if a faculty member partners with a university who has a big, broad plan like Biola does, or whatever university you're in, you will do a whole lot better and get a much broader reach than if you try and onesie-twosies with these organizations out there that are trying to, pull your classroom content. So I do want to share, I know I'm supposed to be talking about books, but I answered that in the first few charts. So I just want to share, I have gone through some experience working with academic institutions on change and on innovation. And I've learned a few things. I'm going to share my observations. They may hurt a little bit, but I want to be perfectly honest, and you can do with it what you may. So one of the problems with the academics that I found is that when you go to do innovation, you focus on innovation as the ends and not the means. And just a real strong encouragement, it is just the means to what you want to accomplish. So keep what you want to accomplish and what you need to accomplish front and foremost. And, some of us heard today at lunch how many bad investments some really sharp people have made. Universities can make bad investments in technology to say they're innovative, but if it's not a means to the right end, you're not going to experience good results from that. And that's my second point there is know what you want and need. I get in these situations where the university wants something so broad and abstract that it doesn't really help with the innovation process. So you really have to kind of prioritize and zero down, what do we want to be excellent at? Where do we want to target our growth, and then go try and resolve that. Also, getting off the traditional product mindset. Lots of people think iPad, if you introduce iPads in the classroom, that's innovative. I think innovation is not that. I think it's more about coming up with just fabulous learning experiences for students. I think that's innovation. The technology is not. It's not about product. And there's tremendous amounts of fear in academia, and that just stifles a university's ability to really go after and be excellent at something and lead something. So those are the things that I see you struggling with. I also think the process of innovation, academics are good at some parts of it and particularly not good at other parts, and I'm just going to share that. I think you're very good at the art of driving from reality to abstraction. You do it all the time. You're experts in research. And so you know how to gather up threads, create a hypothesis. And you do that well, and that's a critical piece of innovation, absolutely critical. What I think you're not as good at is the art of finding solutions. And there's a number of observations I can make that might be reasons for that. But we worked with, just recently, I worked with a university where we literally sent combinations of student, faculty, and administration to other universities, to corporations, to lots of different places. We armed them with how to do interviews. We created massive amounts of great data. And when it came to, okay, now how do we take what we learned to a cool solution, everything sort of broke down. And I think part of that is the difficulty getting back to earth. It might be the fear of some of the technology that underlies this stuff, but I also think it's making intuitive leaps. And I find this in corporate America too, with people who have traditionally been done research in a certain way with good statistics, and we've got innovation doesn't happen like research happens per se. And so it's trying to shift you out of the process of that you'd have to go through to prove that this kind of molecule causes X, Y, and Z. It's very different. It's very intuitive, kind of, not a lot of complete information, and that's not a comfort zone, as is dealing with what I call ambiguity and messiness. And so I sort of, I don't know how to help you per se there, but I've got a couple of ideas. So how do you move the needle? I think first I would say concentrate on specific challenges where fresh thinking can change outcomes. If you do nothing else, take that one away today and chew on it and just see what that means. Particularly since Biola has been very clear, we want to lead. You need some fresh thinking. Something like today is so fabulous. I'm sure it's just triggered a lot of imaginations. And so play around with that, absorb that, work with that. Seek inspiration from outside Biola, from outside Christian education institutions, from outside education institutions. Seek inspiration from all sorts of places. It was wonderful to have Dan up here just talking about his service business. It's so easy to make the leap of what he's doing for his company to what you could do here. And then focus on innovation and ways to solve the problem, and not innovation to approach the problem, and not innovations on ways to solve the problem. I think you're good at this, But people want to jump to the solution. If you know, the way we had people going to gather information, they had a video camera with them. And they had really empathic interviewers that were trained in the interview process. So when they went to gather information, it was captured, and it was in a form that could be used for a lot of other people to share and see. I mean, the traditional ways of going to find out what's happening have changed. And so when I say approach the problem, not the solution, is the problem engaging and educating more students? Is the problem getting overseas education going? Focus on the problem. Distance education is not the problem. It's a toolkit. It's a tool and a solution. It's a possible solution, but even that isn't a solution. It's just a name of something. You have to really work on what is the problem you're trying to solve and how before you kind of jump into that. As somebody who's experienced tremendous spiritual formation, being physically located at a seminary for a year and a half before I went to Zondervan, I feel in my gut that physical presence, that collaboration. Same thing in my MBA at Kellogg. Half my classes was a grade for the group. We had a group grade for half our classes, and we were put in a group of 8 people when we started the MBA, and we went all the way through. Collaboration, face-to-face, all that is necessary for the type of education Biola wants. Don't panic when you say distance education doesn't mean that. You can get innovative about that, amazingly innovative. And it doesn't, you know, telepresence is a great example. It's not the only example out there. There is some face-to-face that you can integrate into a distance education. You have alums everywhere. You have all sorts of things you can tap to kind of help bring that Christian face-to-face spiritual thing that is so important for student development. So the last thing I'm going to say is fire, aim, aim, aim. I think most of you can probably see after a day like today, 5 years out, man, you know, if you give some time to just imagining, man, it's probably going to look like this. The scary part is what's the next step to take? And just take that next step. I mean, right now there's some steps that every academic institution should be taking that it hasn't taken. And realize, okay, what are the unknowns? Focus on those big unknowns and say, okay, because we don't know that and it might be expensive if we pick wrong, we're not going to do that yet. But these other ones that might not be crazy expensive and they're unknown, we're going to fire, and then we're just going to keep re-aiming. Do you know how much time I'm up? Okay. All right. Well, I had some cool stuff. Can I just play one, possibly? All right. Oh, no, instead of that, I'll let Jason do the cool stuff. I'm going to just go back real quick to Google and what that means. Google just made a pitch to be the data warehouse for all books, all orphan books, all books, and it started scanning millions of books in the Harvard Library and other places. And the judge just came out this last month after years of negotiation with publishers and authors guilds and everything else, and the judge said, you're not getting it. Now, Google may come back and say, and win this, but as an amazing judge came out and said, no, you're violating copyright. I don't think this is the right thing to do. There's some privacy issues. So there's one of the things that has to happen to make this whole everything gets digitized is what I call the digital warehouse. Where is all this stuff going to go? If you digitize everything over in Talbot, where does that go? And so there are 3 possible things being chewed on, and I highly recommend that the person you follow is this Robert Darnton from, I believe he's at Harvard, but he also writes for the New York Review of Books. He's proposing this digital public library of America, so he's proposing that somehow we gather all the institutions There's a European solution already getting in place where Europe's agreed. All the institutions keep their own, but the search engines will find it and it will be available for free. There's the Google way. There's a whole bunch of things. This is going to get rolled out in the next 2 years. It'll get vetted out for us. And if we don't vet it out, somebody overseas is just going to take over the world and we'll lose out. So thank you.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.